Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. As the war in Ukraine reached Moscow, a drone crashed near the Russian capital, raising an alarm. Russia is blaming Ukraine for this. We'll bring you up to speed with what happened, as we also focus on another threat that Russia faces. China, its new best friend, wants to take over Russian land, it seems. It has released new maps showing Russian cities with Chinese names. Meanwhile, India is paying China back in its coin. India has announced a major hydropower project in Arunachal Pradesh. This is part of New Delhi's Infra push in border areas to counter an aggressive China. Also on the show, is Iran ready to build a nuclear bomb? We'll tell you about a new claim and why you don't have to be very smart to make a lot of money. Apparently, success depends on intelligence, but not very much. We'll bring you the findings of a new study. The headlines first. Indian capital New Delhi becomes the hub of global diplomacy. Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar hosts US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, and Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang at the G20 Foreign Ministers' meeting. Did Ukraine launch a drone attack on Moscow? Russia says one drone crashed near Moscow, two were shot down in southern Russia. Putin orders tightening of the Ukraine border amid this assault. More than 30 people killed and nearly 100 injured in Greece after two trains collide near the city of Larissa. A passenger train crashed into a freight train. Mexico slams America for meddling in its internal affairs. The president is overhauling the electoral body. Protests followed, and America is supporting the protesters. Sri Lankans defy the government ban on strikes. They're protesting against tax hikes and spending cuts. The strike has forced hospitals, banks, and ports to be closed. Japan's Prime Minister sparks a row. Fumio Kishida says banning same-sex marriage is not discrimination. Earlier, he apologized to the LGBTQ community over discriminatory remarks made by his former aide. The war in Ukraine has taken another turn. It may have reached the doorstep of Moscow. In the last 24 hours, the action has shifted to Russia. Some suspicious events have raised eyebrows. Yesterday, Russia detected some drones. One of these drones crashed near Moscow. Russia says it's a Ukrainian drone. It crashed near Moscow. Two more were shot down in the south. And there was activity in the north too. The airspace of St. Petersburg was closed. All flights were suspended. 24 hours later, conflicting accounts are still emerging. Some reports say there was a drone in the sky. Others claim there was a missile attack warning, a false alarm triggered by hackers. So a lot of activity. We've not been able to verify any of these claims. But was Ukraine behind this? Did it attempt a drone attack on Russia? Kiev has not taken responsibility. But Russia is not leaving anything to chance. Vladimir Putin is strengthening his country's defenses. He has issued new orders. Putin wants his officers to tighten control of the Ukrainian border. The Russian president is also mobilizing the FSB, the Federal Security Service. It's the intelligence gathering arm of the Russian state.
The Russian-Ukrainian section of the state border should be under the special control of the FSB border service. A grouping is currently deployed there, which includes units of border agencies, FSB aviation, and armed forces and the National Guard. Your task is to put a barrier in the way of sabotage groups to stop attempts to illegally transport weapons and ammunition into Russia.
On the ground, the Russian offensive is intensifying. It is the first day of spring in Ukraine, which means weather conditions are set to improve. Russian soldiers plan to make the most of it. They're launching relentless attacks on Bakhmut. The fighting is underway. A Ukrainian soldier sent this message to the Russians today.
We won't give up Bakhmut. We will hold on to it until the very last. Glory to Ukraine. Death to the enemies. Thank you.
So Ukrainian forces are digging in. What about their president, Volodymyr Zelensky? He's increasingly sounding cautious. He says the fighting is becoming more intense.
The hardest thing is still Bakhmut and the battles that are essential for the city's defense. I'll give you just one example. We're holding the staff meeting quite often now, at least twice a week. The last meeting was on Thursday. And today, General Syrskyi reported that since the last meeting, about 800 enemies had been killed in his direction alone. Russia does not count people at all, sending them to constant assaults on oppositions. The intensity of the fighting is only increasing.
Meanwhile, Putin has also found a new enemy: foreign words. The Russian president wants his officials to speak and write in pure Russian. They cannot mix up words from another language. Putin has implemented a new law for this. It doesn't spell out any punishments yet. The Russian president is projecting confidence. It seems he's confident about finding success on the battlefield. And some friends could step up to help, which brings me back to China. It is hosting a very important guest, Alexander Lukashenko, the president of Belarus and Putin's main ally. Lukashenko is on a 3-day visit to Beijing. He was invited by President Xi Jinping himself.
There are no off-limits topics for our cooperation. We cooperate in all directions. And the main thing is that we, the People's Republic of China and Belarus, have never set out the goal to be friends or work against third countries, against anyone.
So China is clearly eyeing a bigger role in this conflict. It began with a proposed peace plan. Now Lukashenko is in Beijing, and soon Xi Jinping could be paying a visit to Moscow. It could happen next month. China has some clear goals here. It wants to have a say in the peace process, and more importantly, it wants to enhance its own stature. India, too, is trying to get in a word. This week, the world's attention is on New Delhi. It is hosting an important meeting. The foreign ministers of the G20 are holding talks in India, and this is very significant because India has a unique opportunity. The top diplomats of the US and Russia are in New Delhi. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, both of them are attending the G20 meeting in person. And India deserves credit for this. The US and Russia are arch rivals. The Ukraine war has only made their relationship worse. Both Blinken and Lavrov could come face to face. They haven't been in the same room since July last year. So there is opportunity here. The Chinese foreign minister will be in New Delhi too. Like I said, India has a unique position, but can it build consensus? It's hard to say. Last week, India hosted the finance ministers of the G20. That meeting ended without any consensus. There was no joint statement. This meeting is scheduled for tomorrow. We're waiting for the outcome. Tonight, we bring you the latest on the India-China border standoff. India and China share a border that is around 3,500 kilometers long. It is disputed because China claims parts of India. You already know about the clashes and the troop buildup. As we speak, some 100,000 troops are deployed on both sides of the border. India matches China on this front. But there's another aspect where India is nowhere close to China, and that's infrastructure buildup. China has a lead of decades. It has built roads, villages, and dams. And this is very important. In the event of a war, infrastructure can make all the difference. It helps you assert control, it improves connectivity to troops, and like I said, China has had a lead of decades. They started building border infra long ago. India began doing it earnestly only a few years back. China has built what experts call hybrid villages. What are hybrid villages? A mix of civilian and military settlements. You can use them for both purposes, civilian and military. Now, India is countering China. The latest step in that direction is a hydropower project. It's the largest such project that India has ever commissioned. It was approved yesterday. This project will be built in the border state of Arunachal Pradesh. $3.9 billion will be invested for this. It will take around 9 years to build. The project is called Dibang. It's named after the Dibang River. The hydropower plant will be built on this river, hence the name, the Dibang project. The plant will be built over 5,000 hectares. Now, for perspective, that's 100 times bigger than the Eden Gardens cricket field. That's how big this plant will be. And what will it do? Generate power. That is the primary purpose, generating power. Hydropower is renewable energy. So this plant will help India's transition away from fossil fuels. That's one objective. But this project has a strategic dimension too. This area around Dibang is considered sensitive. Chinese troops have attempted transgressions here. So the presence of a power plant is going to improve security. It would enhance monitoring. You can track the movement of people and make the PLA think twice before attempting a transgression. By the way, China too has commissioned similar projects. It is building what it calls a super dam on the Brahmaputra. This will be on the Chinese side, the super dam. The Brahmaputra is one of the longest rivers in the world. China calls it the Yarlung Tsangpo. It originates from the Himalayas in Tibet, and from there it enters Arunachal Pradesh, passes through Assam and Bangladesh, and finally flows into the Bay of Bengal. So China is building a super dam on this river, and that's not good news for India. There are fears that China could control the Brahmaputra. The dam could be used for sinister plots. China could pull water from the downstream, or worse, it could release too much water and trigger an artificial flood. India is carefully watching China's moves. And like I said, the power plant is part of a bigger plan. India is also working on something called the Vibrant Villages Program. What's that? It's a plan to upgrade more than 600 border villages. These are in Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh, and the Union Territory of Ladakh. These are all regions that border China. India is building villages here, with roads to improve connectivity and basic facilities like drinking water, electricity, and the internet. This will give a boost to tourism and sporting activities. It will also provide livelihood opportunities to the locals. The goal really is to uplift the local communities. India has committed more than $500 million to this program. It's a clear effort to counter China's border villages. And all this will need security. More boots on the ground to secure the projects. New Delhi is expanding its presence, the presence of the ITBP. That's the Indo-Tibetan Border Police. They are our first line of defense on the border with China. The ITBP has almost 90,000 active personnel. It has more than 170 border outposts. Now, India plans to expand this force. An additional 9,000 troops will be inducted. That would take the total number to almost 100,000. So, troop deployment, infrastructure development, and better mobility. India is countering China on every front. The latest border standoff may have begun only 3 years back, but it's an old problem really. And while the Chinese foreign minister may be in India this week, the border tensions are not going away in a hurry. It's wise to prepare one dam and one road at a time. And this is the message for all of China's neighbors. Guard your borders well, because the dragon has a bad habit of swallowing up land, even if it calls you its best friend. Case in point, Russia. Russia and China are supposedly in a partnership with no limits. They're talking about arms transfer in the war in Ukraine. But that does not stop China from swallowing Russian territory, or at least trying to. Tonight, we'll tell you how Beijing is testing the limits of this no-limits partnership. China is changing the names of Russian territories. A press release has set the cat among the pigeons. It comes from China's Ministry of Natural Resources. Listen to what it says. China's Ministry of Natural Resources has just issued new regulations on map content which require the addition of old Chinese names to the current Russian pronounced geographical names of 8 places along the Russian-Chinese border. The Chinese side released a map. It calls Vladivostok as Haishen Wai, the Sakhalin Island as Ku Yedao, and the Stanovoy Range as the Outer Shingan Range. The message is quite clear. China is taking claim on Russian lands. And what is the basis of this claim? This story dates back to the 19th and 20th centuries. This was a time when the Qing dynasty ruled China some 100 years ago. The Russian Empire launched an attack on China. The Qing dynasty of China lost that battle. It gave up a significant amount of territory. Now, more than a century later, China wants it back. And this is not a theory. China has launched a proper campaign to get Russian land. Its state mouthpieces are pushing this narrative and they're making sweeping claims. I'll give you an example. This was published last week in Chinese. We have a machine-translated version of what it says. Listen to this. Anyone who has studied history understands that these were the results of the unequal treaties signed by China and Russia. The loss of 1.7 million square kilometers of land has become an eternal pain in the history of the Chinese nation. We found this on a Chinese website. And Chinese censors could easily take this down, like they take down a pile of content that they don't agree with. But last we checked, this piece has not been removed by China, perhaps because this is becoming China's official position. China believes it can claim Russian territories. And this is not the first time they've brought this up. In 2020, Vladivostok was celebrating. It was the 160th anniversary of the founding. On that day, the Russian embassy in China posted a video and it led to a massive backlash. Chinese diplomats, Chinese journalists, they all criticized Russia. In fact, I have one of those posts. This is what it says. The history of Vladivostok is from 1860 when Russia built a military harbor, but the city was Hai Shenwai as Chinese land before Russia annexed it via the unequal Treaty of Beijing. A Chinese diplomat also left a comment. Back then, he was working in the Chinese embassy in Pakistan. He said, and I'm quoting, "Isn't this what in the past was our Hai Shenwai?" So the Chinese have always believed and said that the Russian land belongs to them. And now they're reviving this claim, complete with new maps. And Beijing has timed it to perfection. Just last week, China proposed a peace plan for Ukraine. It mostly echoed Russian talking points. Zelensky is interested. He wants to talk to Xi Jinping about it. Remember, they haven't spoken even once since the war began. But Russia is not on board. It wants Chinese weapons to go on fighting the war. And in the middle of all of this, China is taking claim on Russian lands. If you're a China watcher, you won't be surprised by any of this. This is an old tactic. This is exactly how the Chinese operate. It's called their salami slicing strategy. What is salami slicing? Taking control of territories incrementally, one slice at a time. China has done it with India and Bhutan. It has encroached on 36 hectares of land in Nepal. And it has done the same with other neighbors. So if Russia is not careful, it could become the next victim. So much for a no-limits partnership. And speaking of borders, let's talk about Finland. Finland is building a border fence with Russia. We'll tell you why, but first the backstory. Finland and Sweden are brothers in arms. Finland was part of Sweden for 700 years. Then it became an autonomous part of the Russian Empire. Today it's a free country. It wants to join the NATO. It was supposed to join the NATO along with Sweden, but Sweden has hit a roadblock and Finland doesn't want to wait. So in preparation, it is building a border fence with Russia, a 200-kilometer long fence. It is meant to boost security. Look at this map now. Finland shares Europe's longest border with Russia, a 1,340-kilometer long border. Most of it is covered by wooden fences. But now this Nordic country plans to spend $400 million to build a border. If the idea is to stop a Russian invasion, it's a bad plan. A fence will hardly do that. But Finland has its reasons. It says a lot of Russians are entering its territory, especially since September last year when Putin announced a partial mobilization. A lot of people who did not want to join the Russian forces are said to have crossed over to Finland. They jumped over the wooden fences. So now Finland is building a 10-foot tall wall laced with barbed wires. The fence also sends a political message. For years, Finland stayed neutral. It had decent ties with Russia and it consciously chose to not militarily align against Russia by joining the NATO. It had a partner in this neutrality, Sweden. But Russia's invasion of Ukraine made them rethink. Both Finland and Sweden feared they could be next, the next in line after Ukraine. So they want to join the NATO now. They want to secure their borders with Russia and partner with the West in the fight against Russia. Sweden, like I said, has hit a roadblock. I'll explain in a bit. But Sweden cannot join just yet. And Finland doesn't want to wait anymore. Its parliament began a debate on Tuesday. a debate on expediting their NATO membership. It's only a matter of time now, and Sweden is nowhere in the picture. Finland and Sweden joined the European Union together. That was back in 1995. They were pretty upbeat about joining the NATO together too. They wanted to send a powerful message to Russia. Listen to what Finland's Prime Minister had to say.
We're yet waiting, and of course this strains the open door policy of NATO as well. It's to do with NATO's credibility because we fill all the criteria. But as Jens mentioned, this is in the hands of Turkey and Hungary, and we are waiting for their process to finish, hopefully sooner than later, hopefully before Vilnius meeting in summer, but we don't know. It's in their hands.
It's in their hands, she says, in the hands of Turkey and Hungary. What role do these two countries have to play? Finland and Sweden applied for NATO membership in May last year, but Turkey objected. It said Sweden and Finland can join only if they satisfy some conditions. What conditions? Expel Kurdish groups. What are these groups? Turkey calls them terrorists, but the Europeans call them critics of Erdogan. So there's a deadlock. In January, it got worse, especially for Sweden. A copy of the Quran was burned in Sweden, and that too right outside the Turkish embassy. Turkey called it Islamophobia. It cancelled talks on NATO expansion. Here is what the Turkish foreign minister said this week.
All of these activities continue in Sweden. We are not just saying this for the actions of burning a holy book, the Quran. The incident is a crime of hate and against humanity, regardless of which holy book or which religion it is directed against. This action is an unacceptable crime against humanity. As the international community, we have to fight this. But on the other hand, there are commitments made regarding NATO membership. It is not possible for us to say yes to Sweden's NATO bid before we see these steps.
NATO üyeliğine evet dememiz mümkün değil.
So Turkey's stand is quite clear. It may relent on Finland, but it won't say yes to Sweden. What about Hungary? Why is Hungary stonewalling the NATO bids? Their president, Viktor Orbán, is famously at odds with most of Europe. He now says there's a serious debate on NATO expansion and that Sweden and Finland have been spreading blatant lies about his country. Remember, the European Union also froze funds belonging to Hungary. So Orbán is getting back at them. Let me tell you what he said, and I'm quoting. How this argument runs: can anyone want to be our ally in a military system while they're shamelessly spreading lies about Hungary? Certainly not comforting words for Sweden and Finland. The Hungarian parliament has begun a debate on NATO expansion, and Finland might stand a better chance if it decouples from Sweden. Now to West Asia, where one question is doing the rounds. How close is Iran to making a nuclear bomb? I'll tell you why I ask this. You see, Iran's nuclear program is making rapid progress. It is testing missiles at breakneck speed. Its uranium enrichment level is close to 90%. Now remember, uranium is used to make bombs, among other things, and 90% enrichment is weapons grade. To make a bomb, this is the level you need, 90%. Tehran's activities have given a fresh headache to the West. The United States has raised an alarm, specifically this man, Colin Kahl. He is the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. Kahl has made a shocking revelation. He says Iran will need about 12 days to assemble the material to make a bomb. Just 12 days. Listen to this.
Iran's nuclear progress since we left the JCPOA has been remarkable. Back in 2018, when the previous administration decided to leave the JCPOA, it would have taken Iran about 12 months to produce one bomb's worth of fissile material. Now it would take about 12 days.
From 12 months to 12 days. We cannot verify this claim, but Kahl's statement is worth looking at. He's possibly the first US official to give a specific timeline of how quickly Tehran can put together a bomb. It's something that top officials in Washington have only guessed in the past. Take Robert Malley, for instance. He's America's envoy to Iran. He said Tehran would take, quote unquote, a handful of weeks to make a bomb. So what really is the deal with Iran and uranium? And how has Tehran been able to boost its capabilities? Just last month, the International Atomic Energy Agency, or the IAEA, gave the world an update. It found that Iran's nuclear facilities had enriched uranium to about 84%. Now, for the last couple of years, it was 60%. Last month, it became 84%, and 84% was a problem because it took Iran dangerously close to the 90% weapons grade mark, meaning Iran can now use this material to produce an atomic bomb easily, if and when it chooses to. Tehran, of course, has been denied these charges. It says it is willing to cooperate with the IAEA.
Iran has been committed to the Non-Proliferation Treaty and Safeguards Agreements. Conducting professional cooperation with the IAEA remains an important principle for Iran to maintain contact and deepen cooperation with the agency.
Now to the next question. How is Tehran being able to ramp up its nuclear arsenal? The answer lies in the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, a deal signed between Tehran and a bunch of world leaders, including the US. This deal sought to rein in Iran's nuclear ambitions. It had to reduce the stockpile of uranium by 98% in order to have economic sanctions lifted. 3 years later, in 2018, the US junked the deal under Donald Trump. It reimposed economic sanctions on Iran. Tehran retaliated by doubling down on its nuclear program. Then Biden took over as US president. They've been talking about reviving the deal, but it's a dead horse. Washington now says Iran is not willing to engage.
We continue to believe that with regard to the nuclear program, the most effective, sustainable way to deal with the challenge it poses is through diplomacy. But in this moment, those efforts are on the back burner because Iran is simply not engaged in a meaningful way.
Tehran's nuclear ambitions are a story in itself. It's been trying to boost its stockpile since 2018. Then came the war in Ukraine. It gave Iran a shot in the arm. How did that happen? Because this was the time when Iran strengthened its ties with Russia, more specifically military ties. Tehran and Moscow forged a military partnership, and a rather convenient one. Iran is said to have delivered hundreds of kamikaze drones to help Russia fight Ukraine. These are deadly drones that explode on impact. The Iranian list includes the Shahid 136 drones, the Fateh 110, and the Zulfagar missiles. They're all said to be in Moscow's inventory now. And what does Iran get in return? Apparently, it's seeking Russia's help to acquire additional nuclear materials. This is Washington's assessment.
Well, it's moving at a pretty fast clip in a very dangerous direction right now. And what we also see are signs that, Russia is proposing to help the Iranians on their missile program and also at least considering the possibility of providing fighter aircraft to Iran as well. So it's, quite disturbing.
So will Russia provide the wings to Iran's potential nuclear bombs? The story, we say, is still developing. In Africa, the biggest headlines are coming from Nigeria. It went to polls this weekend. The results are in, and it seems Nigeria has chosen more of the same. The ruling party's candidate, Bola Tinubu, has been declared the president-elect, but the story is far from over. This was one of the most hotly contested elections in Nigeria's history. It saw the emergence of a third power, a man called Peter Obi. Opinion polls said he could challenge the status quo, but he has failed. He ended up in the third place. Now, all those who've lost want a repoll, and the president-elect must deal with the difficult legacy of his predecessor, a slowing economy, and impending demonetization. What's worse, Nigeria is being put on the grey list of the FATF, the Global Financial Action Task Force. Here's a report.
Nigeria's ruling party is celebrating. They won the country's tightest election and have retained the presidency.
Tinubu Bola Ahmed of the APC, having satisfied the requirements of the law, is hereby declared the winner and is returned elected.
70-year-old Tinubu broke into a victory dance after the announcement. He's been entrenched in Nigeria's power corridors for decades. Known as a political godfather, Tinubu is the former governor of Nigeria's most populous state, Lagos. He contested these elections with the slogan, "It's my turn." Now he's president-elect.
I am profoundly humbled that you have elected me to serve as the 16th president of our beloved country. This is a shining moment in the life of any man and affirmation of our democratic existence.
His rivals don't see it as an affirmation of democracy. It was a three-way battle for the presidency. There was the APC's Tinubu, Atiku Abubakar from the main opposition, the People's Democratic Party, and outsider candidate Peter Obi from the Labour Party. The APC and PDP have governed Nigeria since military rule ended in 1999. Obi was expected to break their stranglehold this time, but he finished third. Now, those who've lost say the elections weren't free and fair.
The malpractices are on a very, very grand scale, and it is important that we bring the attention of not just the Nigerian community, but also of the international community to these gross violations.
They want Nigeria's election chief sacked. They also want a repoll.
So INEC should repeat the class since they have failed their exams, because this is a major test from INEC. And we had expected that the process would be done in line with the electoral process. And so since they have failed, it is incorrectable, and therefore the process should be repeated.
Do they have a case? International observers don't think so.
The mission noted that despite the challenging economic, operational, and security environment, the elections were generally well administered in a transparent and peaceful atmosphere amidst significant challenge posed by the cash crisis and the volatile security context in some areas.
So what next? Tinubu has his work cut out for him. He'll have to deal with the problems left behind by outgoing President Muhammadu Buhari.
Out of the banknotes previously held outside the banking system had been successfully retrieved.
Buhari's government announced a demonetization of high-value currency notes last year. This has led to a cash shortage affecting millions. The war in Ukraine has hammered Nigeria's economy. Remember, this is the biggest economy in all of Africa. Inflation is around 20%. There are shortages of food. Nigeria's oil production, which led to its economic growth, is stalling. Add to this the endemic corruption and terrorist insurgencies in the country's north, and you can see that Tinubu faces an uphill battle. The latest headache has come from the FATF, the global terror watchdog. It has put Nigeria on the grey list for not combating money laundering and terrorist financing. This means foreign funds will be harder to access. Not an ideal situation for a country fighting an economic crisis. It usually takes about 3 years to exit the grey list when a country works actively with the FATF. Tinubu can expect a tumultuous presidency as he navigates the choppy waters of Nigeria's stormy economy and polity.
Do you think you're going to lose your job? It's a question that haunts a lot of workers, and I'm not talking in the context of the recent layoffs. I'm talking about a scenario where someone else is doing your job and doing it better than you. Not a person or a co-worker, but a software. I'm talking about artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is creating a lot of buzz, also a lot of uncertainty and fear. Will AI tools replace you in the workforce? It's a question we must seriously consider because AI has arrived. It's just getting started. The ball is now in our court. A lot will depend on how we respond to artificial intelligence and how we ensure our survival. I have some scary numbers from a recent survey. Half of the companies using ChatGPT in the US say the chatbot has already replaced workers. That's 50% of the companies saying ChatGPT has replaced existing employees, 50%. And for how long has ChatGPT been around? Just 3 months. In 3 months, it has got 100 million users, and in 3 months, it has begun replacing workers in many companies. What are these companies using ChatGPT for? 66% of them use it for writing code. 58% use them for copywriting and content creation. 57% for customer support, and 52% for documentation. I have more numbers. 55% of the employees say ChatGPT's quality of work, employers say ChatGPT's quality of work is excellent. 34% say it's quote-unquote very good. And about 90% of the companies already using ChatGPT are very impressed. Employers are happy, employees not so much. In Germany, journalists are at risk of being replaced by ChatGPT. And I'm not the one saying this. These are the words of the CEO of Axel Springer. It's Europe's largest digital publisher, so large that it has more than 15,000 employees. I have a quote from their CEO. This is what he said. There will be significant job reductions in the areas of production, layout, proofreading, and administration. He says AI tools like ChatGPT promise, quote-unquote, a revolution in information. And there's more. ChatGPT, he says, will soon be better at the aggregation of information, better than human journalists. These are the words that a journalist never wants to hear. But there's no denying that it's all happening. And not just journalists. AI is coming for everyone, it seems. Well, at least for the white-collar workers. Those who work from office settings, they are the ones at risk. They're more exposed to being replaced by AI tools like ChatGPT. Also, people in the tech sector, those who code, those who are in the customer service sector, artists, lawyers, writers, teachers, traders, and of course, journalists. And if it's any comfort, none of this is new. Think about this. 60% of the jobs that exist today were not even heard of in the 1940s, 60%. And those that did are obsolete today. So you see, our world is always changing. We just happen to be at the cusp of a major change. And we need to know how to respond to this change. How do you respond when your livelihood is at stake? When there's a super technology that could make you redundant? Here's the mantra: adapt. It's not doomsday just yet. If there's one thing humans can do better than AI tools, at least for now, it is to adapt. We can constantly work on ourselves, develop new skills, polish existing skills, be creative, learn about AI tools, get a grasp of how AI functions, make it a co-worker, not see it as a rival. You can work smarter. After all, AI tools need oversight too. ChatGPT's creator and CEO says the chatbot should not be relied on for quote-unquote anything important. So AI has its limitations. This is the time to improve the quality of our work, to make sure what we do is more interesting, more valuable than what an AI-powered chatbot can deliver. And that won't happen if we continue freaking out about whether AI will steal our jobs. So take a deep breath and a closer look at what you do. Like they say, it's all about the survival of the fittest. The world's richest have suffered a historic shock. They made huge gains for years, but 2022 delivered a triple punch. I'm referring to the combination of energy, economic, and geopolitical problems, like the ones created by the war in Ukraine. It has shrunk their wealth, and how? The Richie Rich Club lost $10 trillion in collective value last year. This is the biggest annual decline in fortunes since 2010. But did some get more affected than the others? What were the main reasons behind the loss of this wealth? And can the rich pivot? Our next report tells you more.
$10 trillion. That's how much money the world's richest lost last year. This is according to Knight Frank's wealth report. It looked at over 2 lakh wealthy people. In other words, the ultra-high net individuals. How does one become part of this category? With a net worth of at least $30 million. That's over 247 crore rupees. But the ultra-rich became poorer last year. Their combined fortune fell by 10%, from over $100 trillion in 2021 to about $90 trillion in 2022. And this is a historic shock. It was the biggest decline in their wealth since 2010. Only 40% of the rich saw an increase in their wealth last year. The worst hit was Facebook founder and Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg. He lost over $87 billion. He was followed by Binance's Pangcheng Zhao, with a loss of about $73 billion. Not to forget, Elon Musk was dethroned too. He was the world's richest person. They had a dream run over the past few years, made big money even during the pandemic. Then what happened last year? A lot of the pain was self-inflicted. The alleged fraud by crypto wunderkind Sam Bankman-Fried, the triple shock of energy, economic and geopolitical problems. This led to an extended period of instability and insecurity, also known as a perma-crisis. And of course, there were the antics of Elon Musk. The Twitter CEO lost $138 billion in 2022. And this did not affect everyone equally. Gautam Adani surpassed Bill Gates on the wealth index. Some of the world's richest families also added to their wealth, like the Kochs and the Mars clan. On the global scale, wealthy Europeans had the biggest fall in net worth, with an average decline of 17%. This was followed by Oceania at 11% and the Americas at 10%. Africa and Asia recorded smaller declines comparatively. But none of this seems to have affected the luxurious lifestyles of the rich. They spent millions on luxurious homes, a combined $455 billion in commercial real estate last year, and the rich were the most active buyers in the sector for the first time. The report also says they'll bounce back this year. 69% of the rich plan to grow their portfolios. Billionaire fortunes are increasing by $2.7 billion a day. All this when inflation is outpacing wages in many countries. The pandemic drastically widened inequalities. The richest 1% own almost 2/3 of the new wealth, amassed since the start of the pandemic. 131 billionaires more than doubled their net worth during the pandemic. Close to 97 million people were pushed into extreme poverty in just 2020. They earn less than $1.9 a day. And somehow, when the rich are affected poorly, it boomerangs on the poor. To curb rising prices, interest rates were increased. This led to the mass layoffs. From tech firms like Amazon and Twitter to banks like Goldman Sachs, thousands of companies did this. But just as countries adopt policies to boost economies, central banks flood the economy with money, so the rich become richer. Evidently, $10 trillion is just a drop in the ocean for some.
And finally, it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Starting with Iran, it has fired missiles during a military drill. In South Korea, people gathered to celebrate the March 1st independence movement. In Syria, Bugs Bunny and a clown tried to bring smiles on the faces of children who survived the earthquake. In Spain, an immersive experience was organized for runners. And 2 paragliders reached the K2 mountain and pulled off one of the most spectacular flights. We're leaving you with these visuals. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.